Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, which is a cozy corner of the internet just for narrative and having fun with narrative. And what we do here on Thursday nights is we play solo tabletop RPGs and then use them as a jumping off point to do some writing, which is what I'm going to be doing. And if you are here live, you can join in and be a part of those prompts or interpretation of the prompts in the live chat right now, where a little crop of potatoes is already cropping up. And we have a few rare potatoes in there indeed. I see everyone's favorite uncle, Uncle Kitty, has made time for us today. It's very good to see you back, Uncle Kitty. Things are going well. And Genera, I'm assuming, as I think they're discussing in the chat, I'm assuming that a lot of people can make it here today because many of my viewers are American, and of course it is July 4th, which is the American Independence Day. So I suspect you're either not working or had shorter hours, but I am happy to have you in my shop. If you're not watching live and you just want to get to the game or the writing or the explanation of the rules or see what we came up with, if you're not watching live, there will be timestamps down in the description below you can click on to jump ahead to whatever interests you most. But if you are watching live, you're stuck with me in real time. Uncle Kitty said I had a few days off. That's excellent. Not to cut the fact that I'm very happy to see GS, Jump Store, Tammy, and Zombie Wolf all back here. I'm glad you enjoyed my animal noises. Tammy, my partner, doesn't when I use them to wake her up. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to have a drink of water, and I'm going to get to this game. Before I start the explanation of the game, I'm going to say two things. I am tired. And I am hot, which means we should all lower your expectations about what I am capable of doing right now. Anyways. Come on. There we go. This part of the show is called litgames. It stands for literature games, which is my kind of catch-all for a whole bunch of indie tabletop RPGs, solo tabletop RPGs, lyric games. There's like 50 other names for them. And we basically just games that you can play on your own, that give you ideas for writing, because I am a writer and I enjoy writing. And the game that we're playing today is called Old Home, which you'd be forgiven for not knowing it, but you probably do know who made it. Well, if you know about this sort of scene. If you don't, then you won't, obviously. Oh, hello, Hira. It's good to see you. Imagine I rolled the R. So it's called Old Home, and it has, of course, this lovely, lovely sort of pixel art to it, where you can see a giant, for those who maybe can't see so clearly, you can see a giant green whale up there in the blue sky, with a city mounted up on its back where you might expect it to have a blowhole. Instead, there's sort of a towering city with a light and a bit of a river and some grass around the sides. And flying in on it is a sail ship with wings that's coming in to land on it. We will talk about all those things. They come up. This is subtitled Children Chasing Giants, which is sort of true. But the reason you might know it is it was written by Takuma Okada. Takuma Okada, or No Road Home on itch.io, is the creator of the bona fide classic and arguably one of the first sort of like itch.io really big solo games, Alone Among the Stars. I've played actually several of Takuma's games and I've enjoyed them all. This one seems a little more in depth than the other ones. We'll see how it goes. It's still pretty light and prompt oriented and mostly about writing little stories for yourself. Okay, so let's get to the gist of the world and then the gist of the gameplay. Some of this gameplay we got to do as we go anyways, so we'll sort of start the we'll start the writing a bit earlier. Anyways, I'm going to start with their introduction text that explains the world and the premise for the game. It can slip past you what you're actually doing. I had to read this a couple of times, so I will emphasize some points for folks. All right. For 3 days and nights, it has been the festival of Old Home. As summer turns to fall, colossi across the world gather at their birthplace, and the communities on their backs celebrate together. The morning after the festival, it's customary for the children on each colossus to clean up each town and city, doing a big sweep in a long line with each child holding their arms out to their side, just barely not touching. That part doesn't seem to come up that much. I don't quite understand that specific detail. Maybe someone can explain it for me. Parents motivate their children to get up and out nice and early by telling them that they can keep any money they find while they're cleaning. But there's another side to this. The towns and cities have an agreement that if an important treasure is lost during the festival, someone will do their best to return the treasure to its original owner. Because most of the adults are vital to how each community functions on the back of a colossus, children are often sent on this journey as a coming-of-age ritual. To find a lost treasure, you draw a card, which is the first piece you need to play this game. Write down what treasure is by referring to the treasure table, what the treasure is rather, and record what card it was. Set the card aside for now. From here, you'll travel to other colossi, meet new people, and record your travels in your journal and hopefully return the treasure to its original owner. So let's do the first part of the game. Find out what treasure we picked up when we were cleaning. I don't think I've shuffled this in a while. So give me a, yeah, some of the cards aren't even going the right way. I was in a bit of a rush today, I'm sorry to say. Zombie Wolf says it's a shame Witchery isn't here. She hasn't been on stream for a while. I think like a week or so. It is summer, you know. Well, not in Australia, I suppose, but nonetheless, people get busy. I will be happy to see them again when they get back, but for now, you know, as she is able. Uncle Kitty asks if she's okay. We have no reason to believe otherwise. I'll say that much. It is sort of the nature of streams. There's a little bit of a passing ships in the night quality to it. All right. Let's see what treasure we find. It is a 4 of spades. So now we go to the treasure table. We look, see how it has diamonds, clubs, hearts, and spades, and then it has numbers along the side. So it was a 4 of spades. We found a trombone. I'm going to make a note of that. 4 of spades. A trombone. All right. Now we have our treasure. A Zombie Will says, and here my parents got me up early by saying they'd make sure I'd sleep forever if I didn't get out of bed. I think I'd be more concerned about that statement if you hadn't previously said that you were Sicilian, because it reminds me of something my Sicilian friend would have said with a good sense of humor. All right. Setting out. Now, this is a little bit of background on the creatures. And the fun part, really, I would say probably the heart of what we're going to be doing today is figuring out the creature we're on and what our city is like. That's not the core of the game, but it is the setup of the game. And I considered doing it without you folks and then just going straight into the story elements, but I kind of thought you would want to design a city on a giant animal of some sort. It feels your vibe. Sometimes I do stuff ahead of time if I'm like, I think they'll be bored with this, but I don't think you're going to be bored with that. Um, Generis says, my dad would slowly bang on the door saying Emotep, like in The Mummy. Zombie Wolf says, oh yes, Sicilians are known for their dark, witty humor. Definitely gives outsiders a bit of a culture shock. On my dad's side of the family, it's a lot of Scottish, and the Scots are sharp in their wit, let's say. Anyways, the colossi were formed many centuries ago when the actions of selfish people made the ground a poisonous and dangerous place to live. Boy, I wonder what that'd be like. People gathered what good earth there was left at Old Home, and in response, the colossi began to form. So big piles of good soil were made, and they turned into giant animals. Some became whales that could swim through sea and sky. Others became enormous turtles, strong enough to bear the weight of cities. There are huge boars and great fish and many more. And some are totally unrecognizable from creatures we know today. I see Uncle Kitty's already jumping on this. All right. Uncle Kitty's voting for a giant manta ray. I do like that idea. For what it's worth, where we start, our home city, is not the only animal we get to describe. So if we come up with multiple ones, we do, if we manage to get off our city and on to the rest of the game, in the time we have, before I get too hot, my computer starts to stress out again. If we can do that, we will have a chance to do multiple animals. Oh, yeah. Jumpstore says, Genera, I saw The Mummy when I was probably too young. I was terrified of all beetles for the longest time. The beetles in that were very disturbing, which is not a criticism of the show. Good for them. You know, it was supposed to be a bit of a horror adventure thriller, and they really accomplished it with the horrible beetles. But yeah, those stuck in my mind. It didn't create a phobia in me, but it definitely stuck in my mind. Okay, to play this game, you need 1 6-sided dice for each player, at least 3 total. We're going to be playing it solo, and in the solo rules, it tells us to have 4. So we have 4 6-sided dice. A standard deck of playing cards, a journal or something else to write in, which we're going to have Google Docs, and then some other stuff that we're not going to do. You're welcome to look into this if you want. I got this out of the Palestine Relief Fund package that was being sold on itch.io, but I think it's in some other ones as well, if you because I'm not sure if that one's still running. One thing I will say is, because I keep forgetting to mention it, and I feel like I'm doing a disservice given the nature of this channel, itch.io has a massive summer sale on right now for physical tabletop RPG, what they call physical games, but tabletop RPGs like this. Some of them are very good prices. Like, for example, Sleepy Sasquatch Games did Troves, which I have recommended. I haven't checked if Troves is on that sale, but I will say that their other game, which is quite popular that I haven't played but I've heard good things about, is Glide, based on Dune and what's the name of the game where you wear masks and ride around the sand and it runs like garbage, but it's a great game. It came out a few years ago. I can't think of its name. Anyways. Zombie Wolf says, I also like the idea of a giant manta ray. They're the friendliest and most docile ocean animals. Yeah, they let you pat them at certain aquariums, which I feel like can't be good. Unfortunately, you can't pet them because that'll hurt their protective outer coating on their skin. Well, there you go. I don't know why the aquarium lets you do it. Well, I have an idea. Okay. That's enough distraction, Rory. You came here to do a stream. Do your stream. To start, answer these questions in your journal. And this is where you folks in chat are going to help me build my city. So, the first thing we have to decide is, what does the colossus you live on look like? We've already obviously come down on the side that a manta ray is our creature. So I'm going to read a couple of the examples on here that they give us like prompts to help you come up with ideas in case you folks want me to add anything to that manta ray, because we can do more with it if we so desire. So the examples they give are things like a great rocky sky whale covered in plants. I do want plants on ours, even if it's like sea plants or something. I do want plants. I like plants. I can be sea plants because we are human. We have to be able to like breathe. A sleepy boar, like home, a turtle with snow-capped peaks and many icicles hanging off it, a heavily armored lizard. Well, we all know that's just the evolution of, what's his name? Not Bulbasaur. Is it Bulbasaur I'm thinking of? No. Who's the one that turns into a tank? Blastoise. There you go. Well, that is the one, the creature. It's not what they turn into. Yeah, exactly, Zombie Wolf. That's what I was thinking. A chicken, very, very old, a hermit crab, a person. I didn't see that one coming. I didn't read that far down the list beforehand. That would be very weird. I'm putting that in the back of my head. A bit like a buffalo. Okay, so that's just to give you some ideas of what we could say. If there's some features you want to add to our giant manta ray that we live on, let me know in the chat. I think most of them I could probably work in, unless they're absolutely contradictory, and then I'll have to figure that out. Now, taking us back to the premise. We are a child. We are going to run around the various flying cities trying to find who owns the trombone we found after 3 days of partying that got left in our street. So the family encourages you to go out and explore these other places. So the next thing we have to decide is, what does our family give us for our journey? And again, I'm going to read them off. If one speaks to you or you have an idea on your own, put them in the chat. Go right ahead. Zombie Wolf says Squirtle. That's right. Squirtle turns into Blastoise. Or is there an interstitial? Blastoise is the last one of 3? It's been a while. It's been a while since I've evolved something. So here are the examples they give. A new handheld game, leather gloves, special occasion food. Oh, I don't know what that would be. Maybe mochi? I like mochi. A tool belt, a sturdy knife, your dad's pocket radio, a traveling dress, a spyglass, a musical instrument, or a grappling hook. You folks let me know what our family gives us on our journey, or what you would vote for anyways. Doesn't have to be one of these if you have your own ideas. What is the name of your town and city if it has one? Well, I'll read the names, but obviously none of these are going to be very appropriate for manta ray. Again, let me know what names you want. I'm going to circle back to these and sort of check chat and see what we come up with. What is the name of your town and city if it has one? Alder, Neptune Beach, Greenville, Hollis, Turtle City, Augie, Alameda, Home, Nay, Scale Town. What do you like most about living here? The food, the view from the top of the windmill, my friends, swimming in the summer when it's really hot. To be clear, I'm saying no to my friends because as soon as you introduce a group concept to writing, the introduction is going to take up our whole stream. To describe like even 2 people takes a long time. Swimming in the summer when it's really hot. The sound that running shoes make on cobblestones. Going on balloon rides. Ooh, I do like the concept of balloon rides. The Glass Blowers Guild and the rainbow fish they make. The birds! Learning how to spar. With what? I guess just physically? Like this, with your fists? The art museum, the little store down the street with really cheap snacks. Oh, I do like snacks. The light from the trains going back and forth at night. My water teacher that teaches you what water is. The bug noises in the woods and the parks with all the statues. All right. Before I carry on, because that's sort of our establishing questions, I'm going to circle back. We've already decided our Colossus looks like a manta ray. Was there anything we wanted to add to that? I see Zombie Wolf says it goes Squirter. War Turtle, that's the one I don't remember. I'll never remember that one. And then Blastoise. GS has a vote for what our parents gave us. Our family, anyways. So a tool belt or a spyglass, and then Uncle Kitty votes for the radio. Jumpstore likes the idea of a musical instrument. Is there a specific musical instrument, Jumpstore? Tammy said that her daughter got her a lovely necklace for 4th of July. That's very sweet. Zombie Wolf says, I'm surprised Compass wasn't on the list. Like, did our family want to get rid of us so badly they hope we get lost? I don't know if you can get lost when the only land you can walk on is giant, very distinctly shaped creatures. Maybe they're not worried about it. I mean, the land moves, so how useful is a compass? Maybe there's one on the tool belt, Uncle Kitty says. Yeah. Manta Ray has flatlands. Well, I like grasslands, if that's what you mean. I do really like grassland. I don't know why. I hope one day to go to Mongolia for that reason. Jumpstore says a kalimba. That's a less common instrument, and it sounds so beautiful. Yes, it's a percussion instrument that isn't in your face about it. I don't know why I said it like that. Like I had some bad history with kalimbas. They're just so pushy. Or every other percussion instrument. You know, snare drums. They'll really get in your face. Okay. My weirdness aside. I do like the idea of a radio. I like the idea of a kalimba. I like the idea of a spyglass. Now, there is no reason why I have to choose. So I won't. Parents sent me with a few things. My mother sent me with a kalimba. My father sent me with a spyglass. And my brother sent me with a radio. Okay. Now the next part, I believe, is where we start getting into the... Oh, we need the name of the city. I mean, I think this might actually be a place, but like Manta Bay. It's going to be weird to be a bay when you're flying. Zombie Wolf. Reopening another session of the... Hell of a Boss fan service. I guess Alistair isn't Hell of a Boss, but Hotel, forgetting the name. It's grasslands on the back of a manta ray. Very cool because the hills would be constantly moving. Maybe the Rippling City? Gennaro says has been. Hotel, same universe though. Yeah. For some reason, even though my partner's a big fan of it, talks about it all the time, I can pull neither of those names from my head ever. Hell of a Boss or Has Been Hotel. I'm amazed I remembered Hell of a Boss. GS says Devil Ray. Uncle Kitty says Devilfish with 2 V's. If that's a reference, I'm not getting. GS says Skeet Testin. I think I'm mispronouncing that. Zombie Wolf says Aquarian Moors. Ooh. Yeah, because I guess it would be sort of a moor. Sort of. I mean, we haven't really decided. How about the Rippling Moor? I like that idea. I want something that involves the motion of it flying in its name, because it gives me a good hook to explain it in the text. Okay. The Rippling Moor. Oh, Skeetson, like Steveston. Well, nobody's gonna get that. That's a local reference. All right, the Rippling Moors. Well, is it moors or more? It's more. And what do we like about living here? So it's a grassland moor. So maybe a little damp in places. It's a city. It's a proper city. It's got buildings and houses and roads and all of that. At any time, we're sort of flying through the sky on rippling... Zombie Wolf says, I always thought moor sounded prettier than flat grassland. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Is it a Gaelic word? I mean, it's certainly associated with that area of the world, but I don't know if it is actually a Gaelic word. What do we most like about living there? You know, it's going to have bugs on it and little animals, maybe even distinct ones, because this is centuries later. Okay. While you guys think about what we like most about living there, let me tell you a little bit about how the journey works. To travel to a colossus, you'll need a way to get there. The ground is much safer now, and both old and new forms of transportation are popular across the world, which means we can travel across the ground. But I don't know that that's as fun as not doing that. Each time you're going from one colossus to the next, you'll need a ride. And if you can't find one yourself, roll. If you're heading to a town, roll a die, which will be a d6 in this game. If you're heading to a city, roll 3 die. And I'm assuming add them together. It never actually says that, but pretty sure. And it gives us a few things that we can, as a prompt, as to how we get across to the next one. Once we travel to another part of our city, another city or whatever, we will describe that city. We will draw a card? No, we'll roll. And check it against the arrival table. And basically we will search around that city to see if somebody there owns our trombone. That's the gist of the game. I'm going to do the introduction of our city and the takeoff. How you think I should get from my manta ray to wherever we're going next, which again is a decision we can all make. So if there's another animal you had in mind, we can go right ahead. Okay. So the options it gives is your trusty hoverboard, air ferry, the carapace. Some of these are very abstract because they're just sort of prompting you to be creative. Cargo ship, bullet train, the dragonfly riders, which I'll admit sounds cool. A tall horse. How tall? Like 300 feet tall. Your Uncle Sky skiff, which is sort of how I picture it, but we don't have to go through it. A dirigible. Which I think I'm pronouncing that a bit wrong, but it's basically a zeppelin. Saya engine, which I don't know what that is. I think that's up to people to interpret, unless that's some reference I'm not getting. Submersible. We could. Dune lobster. A moped, gargoyle, Dale's Express sky carriage, a cloud, a broomstick, and walking. And I already see a vote there for a dirigible from Uncle Kitty. We may end up doing that then. Okay. So while I do this little introduction of our city that we just created, we're immediately leaving it. So start thinking in the same terms about where the next city we're going to land looks like, chat. I'll be a few minutes. You know, obviously you can interject ideas. But I'll be a few minutes describing our lovely rippling moor. Perhaps the most memorable trait of the rippling moor, aside from it growing on the back of a colossal manta ray, was captured in its name. The tall, buggy fields that stretched from tail to tip, rolled endlessly, with the slow the tall grass fields. Let's see. Getting a little frisky with those adjectives. The tall grass fields. Tall grass? Yeah. Tall, tall isn't prime. Tall isn't very imaginative. Wheatgrass? Yeah. The wheatgrass fields that stretched from the tail to tip rolled endlessly with the slow flutter of the manta's wings. If you caught it just right, you could roll near forever down the emerald banks. Almost like surfing, but over tall grasses. GS says undulating. Yeah, I'll tell you, here's a little insight to writing. My first thought was undulating. Then I was like, I'm going to have to say this a few times. So is there some other word I can use before I use it? But you're correct in that flutter is the wrong image. Looks like people are talking a little bit about salamanders, which is lovely. And Jumpstore is saying there were some salamanders all over the place where we grew up. The Gulf Islands nearby here, there's an island there called Pender Island that has a lot of, well, it did at one point anyways, have a lot of salamanders. They'd just be all over everything. But the other place I saw it was when I went to Hawaii on the big island. They were all over the house. We were so charmed by them. We were staying at an Airbnb this many years ago. And when Airbnb was cool and actually just people renting their house out. She had like, it was a really nice house, but she was so not charmed by these lizards because of course they just infested her house. It was like us with like mosquitoes or something, right? But for us, we were like, oh my god, it's so cute, and we gave it a name and we were like, don't hurt it. She was unimpressed. Okay. The land was ever changing as the great beast flew through the air. Towards goals unknown. I wonder if these colossi ever breed, and if they do, how that would affect the city. That's the kind of thinking. That's why I'm a writer. The if-then thinking is why I'm a writer. Margie had just turned 12. And this meant she was finally allowed to take the journey. Every year, I knew you guys would take it seriously. There's discussion going on how the breeding is going. I mean, the thing is like the assumption of the giant animal trope is they stay level, right? But like you can't. You know, you're at least angling a lot. In the case of a manta ray, I think they have to flip upside down. So yeah, is it like, we suspect they might be breeding soon, so everyone put on your house seat belts. Make sure everything's screwed to the ground. This is not the story. I need to get back to this beautiful world. Margie had just turned 12. She was finally allowed to take the journey that she had watched the older kids take for 12 years. Uncle Kitty says cities getting frisky has to be awkward to explain. There's a kind of rhythm to that. I feel like that's the beginning of perhaps one of the strangest and least popular hip-hop songs. What did you mean, sir, when you said cities getting frisky? Zombie wolf, no. No, I don't need that. That's okay. She was finally allowed. This is a place of creativity, not facts. She was finally allowed to take the journey that she had watched older kids take for 12 years. The journey was simple. The journey was a dramatic title for a rather simple prospect. Children, after the meeting of the colossi, an anomalous yearly event since their formation, the cities upon their backs would have a 3-day festival. I like the idea that there is no, like, analog, because they are, I guess, technically not these animals. There's no analog between them. That they actually, the way that they breed is they just smash into each other the way, like, tectonic plates do, so it's like a catastrophic event. I don't know why I like that idea, but, like, I guess I like that in our minds it's like, you know, the soft music playing, and it's like you're gonna watch on, you know, Planet Earth or something with Richard Attenborough narrating two animals go through like a mating dance, and all they do is just slam headfirst into each other and create a big pile of rubble that turns into a larger one. All right. Told you I'm warm and tired. The cities upon their backs would have a 3-day festival. As it goes with such events, stuff would be lost. And it was the children who were charged to travel the visiting cities. GS says that's a cool visual, Rory. Genera says it's mating season, time to move. Yeah. There's like an air raid siren. We've noticed our turtle making eyes at the big bear. Everyone get to your dirigible. Stuff would be lost, and it was the children who were charged to travel back, to travel those visiting cities. And return the lost treasures. Margie was in the high fields outside the city proper. I got to admit, like 40% of me just wants the next line to be, and then the mating siren went off. I want to do service to this game, this beautiful game that is not about me. It's not about catastrophic sex between giant animals. I'm going to do it, I promise. I just got myself onto a bit of a track that one might describe as a sidetrack. No, I'm not gonna do it. I'll tell you why I'm not gonna do it. It's not because I don't think it's funny or whatever. It's because I think this is a beautiful game and I don't want to do it a disservice. You know, to some extent, people are going to come to the stream to find out how this game works. And I feel like it's too outside of its tone. But I invite whoever wishes so to develop that premise in the chat if you want, or in the comments later. Margie was in the high fields outside the city proper when she shouted. No, she's a kid. Shrieked, "I found a trombone." Uncle Kitty says, "I'm okay, and I'm just up late. My meds are wearing off." Sorry that they're wearing off. How late is it there, if you don't mind me asking? In my part of the world, it is 7:20 right now. I'm imagining it's like after 10, right? I think you said you were on the East Coast. You're says, to play devil's advocate, games are meant to be played and have fun with. Yeah. I just don't know how to work the rest of this premise into the concept that all the cities are destroyed. 10:20, okay. Margie was in the high fields at the side of the city proper when she shrieked, "I found a trombone." The paper and streamers from yesterday's... Wait. She flung... Uncle Kitty says bedtime is 8? Then you're right, you're up late. My bedtime is much later than that. She flung the paper and streamers from yesterday's parade. Uncle Kitty said bed would be pointless anyway with all the explosions. Ah, yeah. That's such a complicated thing, right? Like, on the one hand, I like the idea of celebrations, and where I live, there's a high population of immigrants from all over, but in particular, various regions of India, and a lot of Indian holidays involve fireworks, I've learned. So we get it very often. And on the one hand, I like it as just an expression of celebration. But on the other hand, you know, it's undeniable that it scares animals and it triggers PTSD and so on. Sorry, I dropped my cards. Have it be the ending. Okay. Okay. All right. Remind me of that, because I'm going to forget. But I'll have it be the ending, and I will explain none of it. So if anybody jumps ahead in the stream and just looks at the story, which I'm fine with, by the way, but I do think it would be funny. The end of the story, which, you know, is probably going to end midway at this point, because it's taken me forever to get this premise done, is going to be, yeah. And then the mating siren shrieked. And the city began its emergency procedures. Uncle Kitty says it's because I have to get up at 4 a.m. for work since they changed my work hours. I think I went to bed at 4 a.m. yesterday. That's not typical for me, but I wouldn't say it's way outside of probability. Alright. She flung paper and streamers. The paper and streamers from yesterday's parade high over her head. Free from the garbage bag they were meant to go into. Free from the garbage bag. God, what is with me today? This is a terrible sentence. She flung the paper and streamers. First of all, she flung the streamers. We don't need paper. She flung the streamers See, what's happened here is a more structural problem with this story, which is there's a lot I have to introduce, and I'm trying to do it quickly because the story's not about this city. Janera says 4 a.m. is my bedtime, lol. Fist pump for listening to the early birds. Jumpstore says, what do frogs and jokes have in common? They both die when you dissect them. Alright, she flung the streamers. Share says I work 5 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. I used to work a shift like that. It was a restaurant. Well, I say 1:30 a.m., but like it would close at like midnight. And then you'd start cleaning the kitchen, and that, I don't know, depending on how the day went, could be an hour and a half, could be 3 hours. It's one of the reasons I don't work in kitchens anymore. As much as I do enjoy cooking quite a bit, you just can't. The only people you hang out with is other stressed out and greasy cooks from the kitchen. Most of who have some form of substance abuse problem. You know, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but I don't think that's too unfair for people who've worked in kitchens. Because no one's ever awake when you're awake, and then you just get back up and go back to this very strange and stressful job. I actually was traditionally a morning person, and it's changed. Uncle Kitty says restaurant work is awful. There's stuff I like about it, but there is some very negative stuff. There's a reason why when chefs get famous, they do everything they can to get out of kitchens, because it's a young person's job, first of all. And second of all, it's all adrenaline all the time. Adrenaline, heat, and grease all the time. And yeah, it just sucks your life away, right? Like there's a reason why so many of the cooks, the traditional stereotypical image you see of a cook is like smoking and drinking and smoking pot and things like that, because that's fairly accurate, because it's very stressful and you never have any free time, so lots of people are into that. The way I describe it is people, because they know I worked in kitchens, tell me to watch The Bear, which is a series on some channel, I don't know. But I've watched most of the first season, and I had to stop because, and this is nothing against The Bear, but it was too accurate, and it was stressing me out. It was like PTSD, in a sort of charming way. I don't mean literal PTSD. I'm not trying to trivialize that real condition, but like your hands would sweat, and I could feel that tension, and I was like, I can't watch this. This is not novel. This is just memories. Yeah, Uncle Kitty, I couldn't do it now. It just on my joints are older. I just couldn't do it. She ran from her friends, her city, and all the cleaning responsibilities. She was technically... She ran straight out to the docks of Rippling Moor, stopping briefly at home to announce she had found her treasure and was off on her journey. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's Zombie Wolf. I was lucky enough that I was in a somewhat higher end kitchen, I guess. So like it wasn't like 5-star or any, or 3 Michelin star, or even 1 Michelin star, but it's a local chain around here, but it is on the higher end. And I was lucky enough because they made enough money to sort of demand better workers and things like that. But definitely I had some experiences, little small gigs I did for cash or something like that with some people who were like that. And I think it's because the job is miserable, and so at some point, if you're trying to run a company, you'll just hire anybody who agrees to do it. That's just stupid. Zombie Wolf, that is a dumb move. Laying everyone off during COVID. Good luck getting people back. She ran straight out to the docks of Rippling Moor, stopping briefly at home to announce she had found her treasure and was off on her journey. She was Marjorie fidgeted in the queue for the city's dirigible. Oh, yeah. I also used to work in a sort of adjacent industry to a lot of like concerts. Uncle Kitty, and for YouTube reasons, I'm not going to say it, but that was around a lot with setup of stages and stuff like that. No one was like super open about it, but just somebody would be a little too perky and sniffly. And then you would avoid them because, you know, it just makes a person erratic. Yeah. Unfortunately, cooking in kitchens is one of those things where, like, to some extent it's unavoidable. Like, if you want to cook for a lot of people and make money, you got to run pretty tight ships. It's not a high margin business. So I do have sympathy for that. But to some extent, it's an existence where it's like, because they know you want to cook, because they know you're a creative person, those industries attract people that really kind of prey on people. Anyways, Mary fidgeted in the queue for the city's dirigible. A great silver pod with a small balcony of benches hung at its belly. Yeah, I think GS, I would rather catch a dirigible than a bus. Yeah. I mean, jump story, like, it makes sense if you worked in kitchens. You know, the thing you need above all else is just endless energy, right? And like, yeah. I will say the kitchen I worked in, we didn't really have a lot of problem with that. I mean, people were doing illegal things, but not that one. But there was a lot of like you weren't supposed to, but there was a lot of people who drank on the job. I can honestly say I never did. That sounded like a terrible time to be. I did like alcohol at that point, but working and like when you're tipsy, it didn't sound fun to me. But yeah, the good moments, the highs are very high. No pun intended. I just mean like the good moments when you put a good dish together and everybody's clicking and stuff are great. But the bad moments are long and stressful and common. Witchery! People were worried about you earlier. It's good to see you. Marjorie, you're late, but also I'm being very distracted today, so I don't think we're getting much done. You haven't missed much. Marjorie fidgeted in the queue for the city's dirigible, a great silver pod with a small balcony of benches hung at its belly. She could not stop staring at how the brass trombone caught the summer sun. You had a doctor's appointment. No excuse. You phone that doctor up next time and you say, listen, the only thing I need for my health is a big dose of solo tabletop RPGs. It's okay, Witchery. I'm happy to see you here. She could not stop staring at how the brass trombone caught the summer sun. In her eyes, it was the crown jewels. And she was off to find the queen that lost them. She was startled by the prodding of a stranger telling her to move with the line, now filtering onto the dirigible. Also, I'm not having a great writing day today. Oh, it doesn't feel... It feels like I'm struggling to say what I want to say. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes I feel that way and then I read it back and it's fine. But I think today is not my greatest day. But that's okay. That's writing. You just keep doing it. It's waves and valleys. It's hills and valleys. Witchery says, it's good to see everyone. It's good to see you, Witchery. We don't have one. We have a Federation Day. I think we technically have a Federation Day in Canada too, but I'd be damned to tell you which one it was, what it is. Is that what Canada Day is? I don't know. I'll be honest. I'm very disengaged with national celebrations. GS says, ours used to be called Dominion Day. I don't know if I knew that, but I can tell why they changed that. Jeez. Although it's a bit more accurate. All right. She was startled by the prodding of a stranger behind her. They're boarding, dear. The elder man said with a knowing smile. Zombie Wolf says, Juneteenth hasn't caught on with everyone in America either, so I'm also familiar with the idea of recent holidays that get very little recognition. I I won't pretend to know everything, but my understanding was that like Juneteenth was always a thing, but it's only officially been enshrined recently. Am I correct in that? Please tell me if I'm wrong. I imagine because of the nature of what it's remembering, is probably why informs some of the resistance to remember it. GSS countries like to form early in summer, apparently. I mean, a lot of these places were being formed when you probably couldn't really travel very far in the winter, so maybe that's what informs that. All the citizens of the colossi knew well that children with little treasures were setting off on their journey in these days after the festival. Genera says we don't get Juneteenth off, but my job still celebrates at least. I mean, that's what matters the most. It is nice to get the day off, obviously, but these days are for remembering. Are we talking about mozzarella sticks? Now, that's something I haven't had since I found out I was a celiac, but I think I know how I could do it. And I probably should because I love them. I love cheese. Let's not pretend like this is some specific interest of mine. You stuff something with cheese, and I'm probably going to eat it, if it's food. All the citizens of the colossi knew well that children with little treasures during these days after the festival Zombie Wolf says, as a Sicilian, I have to make sure that people reference Italian food. It's proper and not a lazy, cheap imitation. That should be in air quotes. I should do an April Fool's special of this show where the intro is just me breaking pasta in half. Except I can't bring myself to do it. I will admit that like proper Italian food is like my preference, but I'm gonna go with witchery here. If all you can afford or get is the improper stuff, it's still pretty good. I mean, food is food. Like, do I spend 4 days making like a turkey for Christmas or something like that? Sure, of course. And it's quite good and great, and I loved it and whatever else. But at the same time, do I also get a great deal of joy out of just eating instant macaroni and cheese? I do. I do shred some real cheese in it, but I do like it. Yeah. I like that change too, Zombie Wolf. Even in terms of history, he was a particularly bad person. Like, usually the argument is it was a different time, even taking in account the it's a different time stuff, which is true. He stands out. All the citizens of the colossi knew well that children with little treasures during these days after the festival must be setting off on their journey. All right. Chat, I did it. I don't know why it took me so long. I do. I'm distractible today. I'm very sorry if this is a boring episode for people watching it back. I'm sorry if I'm being uncompelling. But now I have to ask, what is the shape of the city we're going to? We've got Margie on the dirigible with the trombone traveling to the next colossi. What does that one look like? So it says, come up with a starting detail about the town or city you've just arrived in. Or we can go to roll on the arrival table, which I'm going to do. Where did I put my other dice? There it is. Okay. I have a metal dice here, and I have a plastic one. The metal one is for the top rows, 1 to 6 numbers, and the plastic one is for the vertical row. Yeah, I did know that, actually. Zombie Wolf makes the point that even at the time, the people who had, like, sent him off to do it were like, what are you doing? This is not helpful. Yeah, I figured that's what you meant, Witchery. Okay, the metal one was a 4, which is unusual birds. And if we wanted to be specific to the... It was a 3. I bumped it was 3. A 4 and a 3 would be water purification facility. Okay. Now, why would they need water purification if they're riding on the back of an animal? You would think they would be gathering rainwater. So chat. So we can say we did something today with this game. That's an interesting detail. A water purification facility. I also just noticed, and I find this very charming, the 1-2 over says a person with the coolest gender you've ever heard of. That's fantastic. Gennaro makes a fair point. I would think Da Vinci would be a better choice. Da Vinci was pretty impressive. Certainly wasn't a genocidal maniac. Yeah, Uncle Kitty says they collect rainwater. Yeah, Witchery, you're right. Rainwater can be impure if the areas they come from are unclean. So maybe it's something that lives near an active volcano? Yeah, that's fair, Zombie Wolf. Literally almost any other Italian would have been a better choice. Yeah. There's a bot I follow on Mastodon where bots are fun and cool and not like trying to sell you stuff or to harvest your data. But there's a bot I follow there that gives you the gender of the day, and they're always very silly. I enjoy them. That's not in any way, by the way, me mocking people who have non-traditional genders. It's just sharing in a laugh. Uncle Kitty says, which is contaminated by the colossus sweat. That's a good point. Maybe they need charcoal to purify the water. The unusual birds contaminated the rainwater. Witchery says, I love Mastodon bots. Yeah, there's ones you can play games with by voting. There's a D&D game that's going on there. It's just like you meet things and decide how to attack it or run away. And then they have one where you're playing Pokemon. I forget which one. I think it's yellow. Frame by frame. So you decide what input you vote with the community would input to put in. Oh, yes. There's one. I follow that one, Witchery. There's one called Riker Googling, like from Star Trek. Yeah, that one's hilarious. What am I doing? Not what I meant to do. Okay. Maybe they need charcoal to purify the water. I like that idea. It's contaminated by the colossus sweat. So what does this colossus look like? The first thing that came to mind for me was from Breath of the Wild, if any of you play Nintendo Switch games. Was from Breath of the Wild of the big fire lizard, that machine in that world, but the big fire lizard in that maybe where they're going is to a kind of lizard like that has to be near somewhere very warm. But of course, any sort of bubbling volcanic activity lets up ash, usually quite acidic ash and stuff, into the sky, and maybe that's contaminating the water. That was where my thoughts went. Jumpster says, I thought Next Gen was very problematic, especially the character Riker. I like Next Generation, but I haven't watched it in like 20 years. When I was a kid, I watched a lot of Star Trek Voyager, which doesn't hold up. I did watch a little bit of it later in life. It's definitely for a younger crowd. The one that I liked the most was Deep Space Nine, but I think I've said that before. Like, in terms of, like, when I was a kid, I liked Voyager, but when I got older, I liked Deep Space Nine. Because Deep Space Nine has a very, this is a stretch, so take this with a big grain of salt. I'm making a very thin comparison here. Deep Space Nine has kind of, like, Game of Thrones vibes. Not in terms of, like, it's malicious, the way Game of Thrones is, but in terms of, like, it's about an interconnected political universe. It's very interesting. Yeah, I think the thing that I like the most about old 90s Star Trek, though, was that it was, at its core, philosophical. But as I've seen in a tweet before, Star Trek Next Generation can give you, like, a beautiful episode, and then the next episode could be the worst episode of television ever made. Right? Like, it's most of the Star Treks are like that, where it's like, it's always been a bit of a weird, uneven concept of a series. Witchery says it's like Babylon 5. I never watched Babylon 5. Not for any particular reason. I just never got around to it. Okay. So I meant to say, I was thinking of the salamanders you guys said later. So that's the best I got. I need to write something. Uncle Kitty says I like Lower Decks. I did watch a season of Lower Decks, and I liked what I watched. I was surprised how good it was. Probably not Jump Store, but I know what you mean. I don't remember the episode. It's been too long. The fire... What would a fire gecko, I guess? Lizard? What would that city be called? The first city on Marjorie's journey was a great fire lizard. It spent most its time cuddled up to an active volcano. Yeah, the original series was good too. I connected less with the characters outside of, like, the obvious, but yeah, for me, I feel like Deep Space Nine threaded the needle the best. It wasn't, by the way, that popular in its time. Heliosium, which says salamander. Okay, yeah, it was a great salamander. With a belly of charcoal and magma. Don't know if that makes sense. The big lizard. Salamander's a lizard, right? It's not some other weird specification. I actually want to watch some of the new ones, but they're all on weird streaming services, so I can watch almost none of them. Like, I watched a season of Picard, and that was great. I'm interested in Strange New Worlds. I heard a lot of good things about that. And what What is the one that just ended? To me, it's still new, which shows how time passes. But amphibian. Is a salamander an amphibian? I did not know that. Okay. Big amphibian. Rory, may I suggest sailing? In what context? I have lost track because there is a delay in the stream and I don't know what I'm talking about when you answer. Outside of the festival at Oldhome, lived most its life cuddled up to an active volcano. A city upon its back. I did Zombie Wolf, I just haven't gotten to the name yet. I could do that here. Uncle Kitty says in prehistoric times, salamanders were the size of alligators. Wow. Can I just say, I feel compelled, because I never say this on streams. I used to give like writing advice and stuff on these streams, and I haven't in a long time. But here's what I'll say. If for some reason you do watch this to learn something about writing, I'm going to tell you something about your first drafts. Your first drafts are going to have paragraphs like about 50% of what I've written here, where you're describing the city, and you're giving little details, and so on and so forth. It's sort of what we would call getting your feet wet, warming up. It's a first draft thing. Your first paragraphs are tremendously boring. And usually lore and world building stuff that does not need to come at that time in the story, because you're trying to win your reader over at that point. Most of what I'm writing here probably doesn't need to exist, but because I haven't written it down and thought about it yet, I don't know what does and doesn't need to exist for this to be sensible. So you get too much detail. Was it great? So yeah, this stream is about first drafts, about not being self-conscious about stuff like that, and what it takes to start a first draft, to just write, to not be too hung up on spelling and things like that. But that's what I'm stuck in today. I'm stuck in the mud of this world, and I'm trying to get to a story, and I don't think I'm going to succeed. The city upon its back, Heliosium, was looked from a distance like a tent of conical sails. We're talking about car-sized insects now. I've heard... Oh, you've already said it, Zombie Wolf. Never mind. I was just going to share the same fun fact. Because the oxygen level dipped in our atmosphere, that's why animals had to get smaller. These were rain shields. For the city beneath. The rain, its main source of water. Witcher says, I live in Australia. If anyone brings back very large insects, I'm going on a rampage. Well, not for very long, because the large insects will get you. Rain, its main source of water. The city would use these sails to catch the rain. However, because they lived under the cloud of a bubbling volcano, that rain required processing at their famous charcoal plant. The charcoal that strained Richard says, I know how to make a giant flamethrower. They're going out with me. This is a pretty good image. Charcoal that strained the water was a natural byproduct. Scraped from the belly of the fire. The salamander. Who seemed to find it itchy. Oh yeah, the giant hornets, yeah. They're properly giant, by the way. I don't know if you've ever seen like a specimen or a representation of them, but they're like this big. They're big. But apparently their size isn't even the problem. It's how wide their territory is and how aggressive they are. Marjorie was learning all this as she wandered with the tour group through the cities. She wasn't actually all that interested in the plant or how water was purified or notions of symbiosis. A word the tour guide kept repeating. But Margie did not know. We're talking about Australia's various wars with wildlife in itself. A word the tour guide kept repeating, but Marjorie did not know. No, instead, Marjorie came to Helio City because the trumpet was smudged on the inside and out with streaks of well set soot. Given that Helio City spent much the year under ash, carried on the wind, which says, real talk though, emus aren't chickens, they're hard to shoot and actually take out. That's why the only way to take out emu with your fists. I know what you're gonna say. They're gonna kill me. They have massive talons. Witchery, I believe in you. I believe you could win a fist fight with an emu. Report back next week, tell me how it goes. Marjorie had hoped that maybe the plant, the sootiest of places, might have been its origin. At one point, the tour guide asked if there were any questions. Margie shot up her hand and said to say, then said? Then said. Does anyone here play a trombone like this? Witcher says, "Now I'll set some cassowaries on them." But it's the same problem twice, right? Like you're gonna have to dominate some cassowaries, so you're gonna have to fist fight some cassowaries. Witcher says it's more like emu than emu. I mean, I think I probably know that, but you're not going to trick me with your secret Australian lingo of pronouncing things correctly. They're talking about a bee movie about water bears. Aren't water bears tiny? If there are any questions. The crowd laughed, recognizing this was on a was a child on a journey with a treasure to return. But to Margie's surprise, why can I not capitalize her name? The tour guide nodded and said, I can't say it's the same, but our night janitor would often serenade the street, and he hasn't as of late. Margie's eyes widened, and through a blur of words, she obtained his address. Sprinting ahead of the tour group, despite the consternation of their leader. Yeah, that's what I thought. Zombie Wolf says they're microscopic, Roy. Yeah. Witchery says, no need to fight them. They charge you. You just need a shield and to run. Yeah, but what I'm saying is you block them with the shield, and then you get into a fist fight with a cassowary. I believe in you. As a disclaimer, this is a joke. Don't get in a fist fight with a cassowary. I would prefer you to be alive. Witchery says, horror is honestly such a rough genre to like. I guess I can see the appeal. I prefer like atmospheric horror. The kind of gory B-movie stuff isn't my jam, but I do get it. There's lots of things to watch a movie for, right? Sometimes it's funny, but also like my sister really likes makeup design of all sorts. Monster, gore, fancy. The Witcher says it's okay, I live on the wrong end of the continent. Yeah, no, that's fine. You don't have to actually get in a fight with a cassowary. I'm just being silly. Ahead of the tour group, despite the consternation of their leader. The door for the night janitor was on the 3rd floor of a simple apartment building. Marjorie must have knocked 30 times in 10 seconds. Hearing the man inside acknowledge her, but finding herself unable to stop due to the excitement. Uncle Kitty says, I've seen so many, I think I can find any horror movie for everyone. Just have to know what they like, what their limits are. I mean, I guess, like, for me, it's ultimately, like, I'm an art kid and I like stories, right? So, like, I attract to the ones that have something to say, which is, truthfully, a lot of horror has more to say than people give it credit for. Some people get very hostile when you point out that, like, old horror movies were probably metaphors criticizing something about society or something like that. Some people get very hostile about that. I don't understand, by the way, people who live in a world where they just think that all art is exactly what it says it is all the time. Like, that is basically never the case, and I don't know why people think that is. I mean, most people will say at this point that it's just like lack of media literacy, but it's got to be something else. There's got to be something they're hanging on to. Like, you know, I also really like things that are kind of like on the borderline. Like, is alien horror, I guess, but it's also kind of a thriller. You know, I liked The Ring, both versions. But because it was kind of a mystery movie that also had a lot of atmosphere and odd imagery. And I've mentioned before that I like The Thing, which I guess is horror. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that, Witchery. It's not good right now. To even suggest that something has a metaphorical meaning will get you, like, hate. But finding yourself unable to stop due to the excitement. A groggy-eyed elder man with tawny skin that darkened in the creases. Yawned as he opened his door. Witcher says, I loved Hannibal too. I've not seen the movie Hannibal, but it's borderline a guilty pleasure at this point because I really don't know if it actually was any good. But I really liked the Mads Mikkelsen series that ran for a few seasons, which was really violent and very disturbing. I cannot believe that was on NBC. I feel like I've talked about that before, this show. Very melodramatic, which is not usually my thing, but lots of beautiful food. Yes, some of it was people. Uncle Kitty says, do you like slow burn stuff, Gemstore? I like slow burn stuff, I will say that. I've not read the books, I will say that, Witchery. Actually, my other favorite rendition of Hannibal is actually the one prior to Silence of the Lambs with Don Johnson was in it, I think. Am I remembering that right? I pictured Don Johnson in it. No, it's not Don Johnson. It's the dude from the original CSI. Oh, what's his name? Why did I think it was Don Johnson? Is it Don? That's not Don Johnson. Now I'm just completely confusing myself. What was it called? Oh, someone's going to say it. I have been recommended that, Uncle Kitty. I've not watched it. Well, I think Zombie Wolf, what I liked about the series was it was a prequel to Hannibal, and it goes more into what it meant for him to be a therapist. And it has a sort of interesting reveal and take on it. Like, because there's always the question, why was he a therapist? And, yeah. GS says the one before Silence of the Lamb was chilling. I liked that it was kind of low-key. Yeah, I agree with you, Witchery. There's something that I didn't love about Silence of the Lambs, but it's nothing I can really narrow down. It is an obviously competent and well put together movie. I enjoyed my time with it, but there are other renditions I liked more. Oh, I see Smudge. I wonder if he'll come over here. Smudge. Contribute to my distraction. Manhunter. Thank you, GS. Manhunter. Oh, mystery set on a World War II submarine. Maybe I have seen this. That sounds familiar. Before Margie could even say a word, he gasped, stretched his thin lips into a great smile, and said, "Oh, Bessie is back. My dear, you have given an old man back his dearest." Trumpet. Okay, no, I don't remember Zach Galifianakis being in a serious role. You know, honestly, Zombie Wolf, I prefer that aspect. I did not like, I don't like the attempts to make Hannibal sympathetic, even if it is sort of more canonical. Though, like I said, I haven't read the books, but I kind of just like the fact that he's menacing, in different ways. Also, I really like Mads. Handsome man, great actor, just fun to watch. Marjorie smiled right back, and with a bow of her head, delivered the trumpet high on her two hands. The old fellow, who she learned never learned the proper name of, but told her to call him Momo. Yeah, the well, I don't know. So Zombie Wolf, I'm sort of on the fence about that because I don't really think the show is just trying to film the books, right? Like the show is trying to be its own thing, and I think it had its own take on him. That's sort of the way I look at it. I don't really think adaptations have much responsibility to be accurate to their source material, which I know is a bit of a controversial position, but I think it's a position that actually most writers hold. Oddly enough, I think it's more readers and viewers of stuff that feel protective of stuff. Writers know that all of this stuff could go many ways, and I think are interested in seeing their work go that way. But I like the Mads Hannibal the most, because he's a sadist, right? Like that's Hannibal's core character trait, at least stated character trait, and the one in the books, I don't know, doesn't sound like he's a dyed-in-the-wool sadist, but the one in the series definitely is. But I mean, that's the great thing about adaptation. We have 4 different versions of Hannibal. You can find the one you like the most. The old fellow, who she never learned the proper name of, never learned his proper name. Was that the name of the one from Manhunter GS, Tom Noonan? So pale and pasty and scary. Yeah, I think what I liked about the one in Manhunter was he was very oily. But told her to call him Momo. Zombie Wolf says, if they're not going to attempt to adapt the original source material, then why not make your own original film or show? Because I don't think that's how creativity works. Why irritate and isolate the fans by failing to meet their expectations? You're never going to meet fan expectations. Like there is no adaptation that is completely accepted. I think the one that people point towards is Tolkien, like Lord of the Rings, because that's such an iconic series. Those movies are despised by hardcore Tolkienites for various reasons. You're never going to make it. The fans are not unified. It's just different. The way I put it, I wrote an essay about this, and then I didn't like it, and so I never did. But I keep bringing up pieces of it, and I should just finish it. The way that creativity works is more like how folklore works, where you get these forms of stories and common characters, and then you kind of do your own spin on it, and then somebody does their own spin on that, and whatever. And then after about 100 years, it becomes something else. You could rename these things, I guess, but that's a very modern concept of creativity. The way that stories develop and creativity develops, this is sort of arguably at the core of everything I do on the Varietal, is to reintroduce people to the concept that creativity is a community activity. Zombie Wolf says, I can create my own original stories, but they're not going to be original stories, right? They're going to be a mixture of your own experiences and the art that you grew up with and so on. It's just not how creativity works. Creativity is more like evolution, where it's a series of DNA strands that mutate and adapt. I think the idea that an author owns their story and other people need to call it other things now is a very copyright informed view of creativity. It used to be a bard comes and tells a story, you memorize it, and you make your own version of it. I'm in that school of thinking. I prefer that. That's why I'm open to variance and adaptation. She never learned the old fellow's proper name, but told her to call him Momo. He played her a few tunes. None she could recognize, but they had a good swing. Then sent her off with a little scuffed trombone. Apparently, it was the one he learned to play on. And he thought she might enjoy it. Margie certainly did enjoy that trombone for the whole walk back to the dirigible. Margie became a menace, a bleeding, wailing racket echoed up the tall, soot-stained walls. Jumpstore thinks if they're not going to stick to the source material, they shouldn't have called themselves an adaptation. I don't know. I just don't think it matters that much. I think if you don't like an adaptation, that's fine. There's lots of adaptations I don't like. But like, you just don't see them. I just don't see what's the stake here. Making a bad adaptation only really matters if, you know, you believe that they're never going to do anything with that story again. But yeah. I mean, people don't have to agree with me on this, but I would say I'm fairly firm on that, the belief that stories belong to communities. Communities evolve stories and should be free to use the names and titles as they see fit. Uncle Kitty says, for Ray, I'd recommend a 2007 Korean film called Black House. Okay. Well, I'll take a look at it. I don't know if I'll watch it, but I'll look up about it. Marjorie became a menace of bleeding, wailing, and they stained walls. Some found her attempts at play charming, but others Witchery says, is this where I go on my public domain rant? Is that not what I'm doing, Witchery? Like, I'm a pretty hardcore believer in the public domain. I think that locking it off is like locking out the gene pool of creativity. There's a rather famous... this is my best way of explaining my view of this. There's a rather famous clip of... why can't I think of his name? It's a Parks and Recreation clip that they didn't put in the show, at least not the whole thing, of famous nerd comedian, who I cannot think of the name of right now, going on a rant about how Marvel, Star Trek, and Star Wars could be in a connected universe. I think at the heart of what I think creativity is madness like that. And if they wind up having different names and being something else, that's fine. But that's why folklore is the way it is, right? Like folklore, if you watch my Tuesday streams, you'll see these forms and you'll be like, well, that's a sort of a story form, but this is more a character like the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, and it's got a different ending, more like that other thing. And that's sort of more how creativity comes together. Pat and Oswald, thank you, Uncle Kitty. Yeah, that's what I'm going to check, Uncle Kitty. The older I get, the less I want to watch disturbing stuff. Anyways, I guess my view is that stories never needed protecting for like the last 1,000 years. So, well, more than that. So they don't need it now. I'm sure someone from the 16th century would like hate our renditions of various stories he recognized, but whatever. Yeah. 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 I'm not going to go into all of it, but I agree with you, Witchery. Her attempts at playing, being... Some found her attempts at playing charming, but others did not, and shouted for her to shut up. Thankfully, her playing was so loud and obnoxious, she could not hear the jeering of Helio City. Unfortunately, she also didn't hear the screech of the mating sirens. To be continued. There we go. Uncle Kitty says Black House is a horror film about an insurance man terrified by his client. Oh, interesting. Zombie Wolf says, when I watched Saw X, I actually laughed quite a bit, which was unfortunate because it was in a movie theater. I was worried people would think I was a psycho. It depends on why you're laughing, I guess. I mean, those shows are pretty campy. Yeah. I'm not super like touchy about gore, but like I don't seek it out. I want my stories to use the materials it has in a meaningful way. If it's gonna be gory, there better be a reason it's gory, right? All right. I made it to the end. This is the longest amount of time I've taken to write so little. All right. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's just because you want to know what we came up with. And what we came up with was based on this game, Old Home, from Takuma Okada, who, of course, was the creator of Alone Among the Stars, a game I think I've played twice on this channel and is one of my all-time favorites. The game requires you to have a bunch of 6-sided dice and a deck of cards. I was very distractible today, so I didn't get much writing done. But we did get a little short story done. I'm going to read you what we got to. Oh, I should say, because we only established so much, the premise of the game is that you have to travel between giant animals with cities on their back to try and return a treasure that accidentally got left in your city after a festival. Perhaps the most memorable trait of the rippling moor, aside from its growing on the back of a colossal manta ray, was captured in its name. The wheatgrass fields that stretched from tail to tip rolled endlessly with the slow undulation of the manta's wings. If you caught those hills just right, you could roll near forever down the emerald banks, almost like surfing, but over tall grasses. The land was ever changing in that way as the great beast flew through the air towards goals unknown. Now, Margie had just turned 12. She was finally allowed to take the journey that she had watched older kids take for 12 years. For all those 12 years. The journey was a dramatic title for a rather simple prospect that the adults sent the kids upon. Project, I guess. After the meeting of the colossi, an anomalous yearly event since their formation, the cities upon their backs would have a 3-day festival. As it goes with such events, stuff would be lost, and it was the children who were charged to travel to those visiting cities and return those lost treasures. Marjorie was in the high fields outside the city proper when she found hers. She shrieked, "I found trombone!" And she flung the streamer she was picking up high overhead in her celebration. She ran quickly from her friends, indeed from the city itself towards her home, and of course all the cleaning she was technically responsible for back in the city. She ran straight out to the docks of Rippling Moor, stopping, of course, briefly at home to announce to her family she had found a treasure and was off to return it and go on her journey. Margie was fidgeting ever since she found that trumpet, and in the queue for the city's dirigible, the way they traveled out of city, which it was, of course, a great silver pod with a small balcony of benches hung at its belly, she could not stop fidgeting, twisting and turning the trumpet in her hand. She could not stop staring at how the brass trombone caught that summer sun. She couldn't stop pushing on the little buttons and blowing into it, hearing the whistle of an unmusical sound. In her eyes, it was the crown jewels, and she was off to find the queen that lost them. She was startled back to reality by the prodding of a stranger behind her. "They're boarding, dear," the elder man said with a knowing smile. After all, the citizens of the colossi knew well that children with little treasures during these days after the festival must surely be setting off on their journey, and it reminded them of their own. The first city on Margie's journey was a great salamander with a belly of charcoal and magma. This big amphibian outside the festival, beyond the times when the festival at Old Home occurred, lived most of its life cuddled up to an active volcano. The city upon its back, Heliosium, looked from a distance like a tent of conical sails. These were actually rain shields, nothing to do with the wind, for the city beneath. The city would use the sails to catch the rain. Because they lived under a cloud of a bubbling volcano, that rain was a bit acidic and dirty, and required processing at their famous charcoal plant. The charcoal of the plant didn't make charcoal though, it strained the water through it. The charcoal itself was a natural byproduct scraped from the hot belly of the salamander, who seemed to find it itchy and relieved when they peeled it off. Margie was learning all these details about the water plant as she wandered with a tour group through it. She wasn't actually all that interested in the plant or how water was purified or the function of it or notions of symbiosis, a word the tour guide kept repeating, but Marjorie did not know. No, instead Marjorie came to Helios City because the trumpet was smudged in on the inside and out with streaks of well-set soot, particularly in its scratches. Given that Helios City spent much of the year under ash carried on the wind from the towering volcano, Marjorie had hoped this marking on the trombone meant it was from Helios City, if not the very plant she was in, since it was the sootiest of places in the city. At one point, the tour guide asked if there were any questions, and Marjorie shot up her hand, then shouted, "Does anyone here play a trombone like this?" Well, the crowd laughed, recognizing this must be a child on a journey with a treasure to return, but to Margie's surprise, it worked. The tour guide nodded and said, "Well, I can't say it's the same, but our night janitor would often serenade the street, and he hasn't as of late. Maybe you lost it." Margie's eyes widened, and through a blur of words, she managed to obtain his address, then sprinted ahead of the whole tour group despite the consternation and shouting of their leader, who could not catch up to the quick little girl. The door for the night janitor was on the third floor of a simple apartment building. Marjorie must have knocked 30 times in 10 seconds, hearing the man inside acknowledge her early on, but finding herself unable to stop knocking due to her overwhelming excitement. Finally, a groggy-eyed elder man with tawny skin that darkened in the creases yawned as he opened his door and stared down upon the little girl. Before Margie could even say a word, he gasped, stretched his thin lips into a great smile, and said, "Old Bessie is back! My dear, you have given an old man back his trumpet, his dearest trumpet." And Marjorie smiled right back, and with a bow of her head delivered the trumpet high on her 2 hands as if she was some great knight before a king. She never learned the old fellow's proper name, but he told her to call him Momo. Momo played her a few tunes, none of which she could recognize, but they had a good swing, then sent her off with a little scuffed trombone of her own. Apparently it was the one he learned to play on, and he thought she might enjoy it. Marjorie certainly did enjoy that trombone, as she wasn't worried about breaking this one. For the whole walk back to the dirigible station, Margie became a menace of bleeding, wailing racket that echoed up the tall, soot-stained walls of the neighborhood. Now, some found her attempts at playing charming, but others, frankly most, did not, and shouted for her to shut up. Thankfully, her playing was loud and obnoxious. She could not hear the jeering of Helios City. Unfortunately, she also didn't hear the screech of the mating sirens. To be continued. I might not continue this. Tammy says, "Sorry everyone, I had to take my puppy out. She got scared by some fireworks, so I've been dealing with her. Been listening to all the fun." Aw, poor puppy. Yeah, what I particularly like is Witchery wasn't here, I think, for the mating sirens, so God knows what you think is going on. To answer your question, Zombie Wolf, yes, I did. Random trivia. Polydactyl cats were thought to bring good luck to sailors and were purposefully bred to have the mutation, which was very easy as only one parent needed to be a carrier of the mutation. Polydactyl cats are also known as Hemingway cats due to Hemingway being gifted a polydactyl cat by a sailor. He fell in love with the cat. To this day, there are 50 cats on Hemingway's home. Yeah, he did like fishing. Witcher says, I'm confused. When you watch the beginning of the video, if you choose to go back and watch it, we got off on a sidetrack. You just missed it, actually. For once, I ignored the chat's advice on the story, but I don't know if that was the right choice. They all think I should have done the mating siren thing. And I'll be honest, I'm still conflicted. Alright, well, that was weird. I was distracted. That is not reflective of the game. I think the game is fun. I think it's a cute little game. I like the concept. I think art goes a long way in tabletop RPGs to helping immerse you in it. I think Takuma Okada is a master of simple prompts that make you think of many things. I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to show more of the tables, but I think it's fun. I think if you have tried Alone Among the Stars and you like that kind of feel in a game, this is a more sort of elaborated version of that. Not concept exactly, but that feeling. And it's one that you can play with multiple people if you want. Yeah, I think it's good. Witchery says, sidetrack on this stream. I mean, I try my best. I do try my best. To take a line from Johnny Chiodini. My best. Okay, before I get distracted again, somebody brings up copyright or something, and then the stream turns into 3 hours. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Jump Store, Tammy, hope your puppy's okay. Hope your shoulder feels better. Witchery, Uncle Kitty, it was so good to see you again. Thank you for staying up with us. Sorry that I went so late. It must be almost midnight there. Witchery says, we are chaos goblins all. It's not just you, it's me too. I don't know. Some days I'm very distractible. Anyways, Genera and Zombie Wolf and Uncle Kitty and GS and Tammy. So many, I'm gonna miss someone, aren't I? And anybody else out there lurking or who I've forgotten. Thank you so much for watching. You don't actually have to go home if you're not already home. But you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.